Good question. Well, my transition from military flight instructor to civilian ground school wasn't by choice, I can promise you. If I had not lost the medical category, I'd probably still be flying now. No, who am I kidding? I'm too old for all that stuff. I was civilian ground instructor almost by default. I drifted into it via a stint at Gustle and Westland as a technical author for them. That contract came to an end and I saw an opening at Bristol Ground School and went for it and been teaching ground school there and other locations ever since. So basically I had my time flying. The medical caught up with me, as it'll catch up with everybody one day. So here I am ground instructing. Well, I don't think there is a typical day as a flight instructor, helicopter or fixed wing. I don't think there's anything typical about the students. They're all different. They all bring their own strengths and weaknesses, skills and lack of, and it makes for one of the most interesting jobs in the world. I would not regret a single day of my 30 years of military flying, and most of that as an instructor, because the students are just the light of my life. Challenges, gosh, I mean, apart from the challenge of gaining my wings in the first place, just staying on top of the game, I suppose that's quite an important one. It was it was a great career. I loved it. And now I view my passing on of my skills, such as I learned, I view them now as passing on the baton to the next generation of pilots. And I really get something out of that. I love it. I love what I do. I was inspired by my flight instructor on Chipmunk during my pilot's course back when the earth was flat and I still had a waistline. And he inspired me to be the instructor that I hope I've turned out to be. If I'm a tenth as good as him, I'll be happy with that. I'll take it. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but what an absolute gentleman. Military background, yeah, I mean, people would presume, I guess, that sort of 30 years in the army and then out of it teaching military students would mean that I'm very good at jumping up and down and shouting. Very, very far from it. We only shout for effect in the military. In fact, I think my military background gave me a good grounding in respect upwards and downwards through the ranks. And obviously some of the teaching style has rubbed off on me, but I think generally a humane and humanistic approach is best in all things, especially when it comes to flying training. Ideal relationship, gosh, is there one? Yeah, there should be. It should be harmonious. It should be non-confrontational. It should be a mutually beneficial environment where the student doesn't feel pressured, ridiculed, or otherwise looked down upon by the instructor. There is a type of instructor that does that, literally makes themselves look good compared to their student. Not my kind of instructor at all. I fostered relations with my students, or I hope I did, because I got the most out of them. In fact, one of my specialities as a military flight instructor was to pick up the students that were struggling, that needed extra time, extra tuition, a guiding hand to send them on their way. And I had quite considerable success with that over the years. I was never sort of Father Christmas, despite the white beard now, but even as a military flight instructor, they didn't get away with it for nothing. But I did have a fairly good success rate with problem students. And yeah, really, really enjoyed that. Strategies, well, I think you build your strategies as you go along, your whole toolkit for life, isn't it? So you're asking about communication and trust and connecting and instilling confidence. I think the very best thing I could say is lead by example. Don't expect a student to do something you can't do. Remember what it was like to be that student. I went through a phase on my instructor's course, having never failed a check ride in my life, and I failed my check, my final check to be an instructor, and I'm thinking, geez, this is what it feels like to be under the microscope. And it made me a better instructor. You know, if I had any feelings of superiority or arrogance about me then, I hope I didn't, but if I did, being on review really sorted that out. And so every time I picked up a student who was on review or air warning or whatever we were calling it that week, I instantly had rapport with them, and I could tell them, look, I know where you are, mate, because I've been there. So I think a little bit of humility and treat the students with dignity, and that way you build that confidence, you build that relationship. Let me tell you a little story of basic rotary at Middle Wallop. My instructor passed away now, sadly. My instructor and I did not get on that well. I found him a bit nitpicking, a bit high-handed. One of his highlights of a debrief was to say to me, bear in mind, I'm about 1,000-hour crewman, which is all front seat in the Army. So I had quite a bit of experience already. And his debrief to me was, well, you'll scrape through this course, but you're never going to come to much as a pilot. And I thought, oh, thanks for the big chuck up there, mate. And the only reason I didn't ask for an instructor change there and then, or even before then, was because I didn't want any of my course mates to have to put up with this difficult person, putting it politely. They tell us at the start of the course, look, nothing says you have to get on with your instructor. If you're not getting on, ask for a change, nothing more will be said. So I didn't ask for a change. And then we had a routine mid-course change. And one of my course mates picked up my old instructor and I got somebody else. He came to me afterwards, my fellow student, said, I don't know what your problem with this guy is. I'm getting on fantastic with him. Which just goes to prove there's nothing to say we have to get on with each other. Years later, in a similar situation, a young officer student came to me at Shawbury at the Tri-Service School and said, Sergeant Major, can I have a quick word? And I said, yeah, of course you can, sir. What's the problem? He said, I think I need an instructor change. I said, fine, it's done. He said, what, just like that? I said, yeah, when we tell you ask for a change, we mean just like that. I said, I've only got one question. Why did you come to me with the problem and not your flight commander? He said, it is my flight commander. Right, I said, I can see your difficulty. I went to his flight commander. I said, your student's just coming out of word. He said, let me guess. He wants an instructor change, right? Instructors know when you're not getting on. There's nothing in the book says you has to get on. So you just ask for somebody else because, you know, you need the best chance you can get through the course. So why didn't I take it? Because I was a fool. I helped other people make that decision many times. Giving common mistakes or misconceptions. Gosh, where do you start the book on student misconceptions? You know, we're not out to get you. We're not out to chop you. We don't have a quota for how many we've got to get rid of. Yes, if we put 20 students on a course, we would like 20 students to graduate. It doesn't always happen that way, but it happens more often than you think. So those misconceptions, the student paranoia, I suppose you could call it, is that they're out to get me, they're out to chop me. Only 5 more chopping days till Christmas and so on. The only way you can break them of that is to show them that is not the case. Well, learning style, I think, is very much an individual thing. You know, you always try and put your own stamp on the basic skill set of being an instructor. One humorous way of doing it, the Central Flying School mnemonic for fault recognition was RCP, which is recognise, correct and practice. But of course, we redesignate that to ridicule, criticise, patronise. We never did, of course, but that was just, you know, the tongue-in-cheek approach to learning styles and how to deal with the students at different school levels. I've taught some really, really capable students, one of whom has gone on to be the station commander at the naval station at Culdrose. Other people who've gone on to be 4-ring captains in the Navy, brigadiers and higher in the Army. Some really top-class people. I've also taught some students who have come from a much lower starting place but have still passed the course. So I think you've just got to adapt your style to the level of the person you're flying with. One of my great privileges at Shawbury as a squadron training officer was teaching senior officers to fly helicopters who had little or no experience of helicopters, but were now moving into a domain like that. And I remember one of them, he was an air vice marshal, one of a number I trained up there. And amazing, when they're away from the high pressure of the rank, they are about as approachable as any other student. And I had this air vice marshal, we landed on after his first flight, and he said, well, Sergeant Major, I've got to tell you, that's my first time I've been on the controls in 7 years. And I said, thanks for that, boss. I could have done with that information 2 hours ago. And then he said, right, how do you take your tea? I said, I couldn't possibly do that, so you're an air vice marshal. He said, I'm a student while I'm here. I know me place. And I thought, you, mate, will do for me. Lovely chap, absolutely lovely chap. So that, if you like, is encapsulating some of my flight instructor days, some of my ground school days. What is my favourite helicopter to fly? Do you know, I never thought anything would replace the Gazelle in my affections. A little low-slung sports car with sheepskin seat covers and a proper leather grab handle, and a very faint whiff of garlic when you open the door. I thought that would be the case. I did about 3,500 hours on Gazelle, and I thought nothing would ever replace that dear old lady in my affections. And then I flew the Squirrel for about the same time over a 15-year period. So I'd have to say equally on both of them, I suppose. Well, I suppose one of the best things to give them is the advice about the fact that we've got 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So we should listen a lot more than we speak. And never be afraid to speak up, I suppose. That's another good piece of advice. Well, I started my career as a very young man, leaving school at 15, doing a variety of jobs, primarily roof tiling, working in the tyre industry, driving trucks. Started off driving a delivery truck and ended up managing a truck tyre manufacturing company. So I guess I could fall back on any of those. But actually, when push came to shove, I fell back on the other great love of my life, which was boats. So when I could no longer fly, I retired for a year and a half. And then I thought, no, bored. What am I going to do? And I only knew 2 things, boats and helicopters. So I sold boats for a year, then I went back to helicopters. So take your pick out of that lot. Catch you next time, folks. Bye for now.